Hello, everybody. Welcome to Built by BIPOC. My name is Carissa Begonia. I'm the founder of Conscious Exchange. I'm a second generation Filipino American, daughter of immigrants, a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner specializing in AAPI identities and experiences, as well as a business and leadership coach for BIPOC professionals and entrepreneurs. I started Built by BIPOC because I'm just tired of hearing that there isn't enough BIPOC talent out there. And I'm also really tired of hearing of being the first, the only, the other, often in spaces that I find myself in. So, here on this show, I'm going to be highlighting the journeys and the practices of BIPOC entrepreneurs and company leaders who are either claiming their seat at the table or building their own tables and advancing DAI at work. So today, we're kicking off our series with Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month, and I'm really, really excited to introduce you to my coach, Shanee Moret. So Shanee is a Cuban-American entrepreneur, coach, speaker, and LinkedIn influencer who has, get this, currently over 1 million followers on this professional networking platform. Shanee is the founder of Growth Academy, a community dedicated to helping entrepreneurs grow their businesses through online training that connects like-minded people to network with one another and develop their professional skill sets. So thank you so much, Shanee, for joining me. And really for the subject today, we're going to be talking about alternative paths to success. So thanks, Shanee.
I love it. Thank you for inviting me on here today. The prep has been a drill in and of itself. This is like half interview, half therapy.
I'm glad. I guess when we first were prepping for this, right, Shanee, a lot of what I'm asking you today is maybe different from what you're normally asked, right? You're probably asked so much about how do you run a business? How do you start a business? All the business questions. And I'm like, tell me about you. Tell me about, your experience as a Latina woman. So, maybe we just kick off with that. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about who you are as opposed to what you do.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so true. When I get interviewed, it usually just is about business. But, from the cultural standpoint, my dad came from Cuba when he was 9 years old. So they came in the Mariela. And my grandfather, actually, the only reason why they were able to get a ticket for the boat is because and I've never shared this before, it's because his first cousin, so you're doing a good job already. His first cousin was the wife of an ambassador. And my grandfather was able to, take my father and my aunt, who was like 1 or 2 at the time, and bring them here. And for up until he died, really, I'd say that he resented the leadership that took over, and he resented having to leave because he was on track to be an engineer. And then you come here and you don't have any education, any credentials, start from zero. And he was around like 30, 31, 32 years old. So that's on that side. And then my mom is Puerto Rican. So I was born in Florida. And, I guess I'd say I'd overcome a lot of odds as building what I've built, being a single mom, a Latina, and, kind of a rebel to cultural norms. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad that you're able to share a little bit more about your culture because I think that's so important, culture in our business and bringing that, even though if we're not explicitly like sharing that all the time, I think it's somewhat relieving often when we can just truly be ourselves, right? And that does include our ethnic, cultural, racialized background. So I'm glad that you're able to share that with us today.
I'm happy. I'm excited for the conversation. And, I'm just excited.
Yeah, so I know that you tell it as it is, and so I think we're just gonna dive in and like go to some of the juicy hard stuff. And so my first question for you really is, as a BIPOC professional, right? We are often having to work harder to prove ourselves to folks. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about when you defied expectations and did something to prove others that you are absolutely not somebody to be underestimated. And how did you handle that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's very true. And that's even if you get to that point, right? Because most people won't even get to a point in their business where they have to overcome that underestimation, because the first people who hold them back, especially like, in my experience, was my family, right? Like, you should have a secure job, especially being a single mom with a very young baby was a risk. So, this is dangerous. You should just have a secure job. And I think that that was like the first underestimation that I had to overcome. And only when I overcame that, then, I had to deal with other underestimations on the client and the business side. But I really think that at the end of the day, results don't lie. And I also think that you have to have the self awareness where you have to know which environments to go to. You have to know that if you're just going to continue to hit a brick wall in one environment, you're not going to be able to grow. No matter if you have the most potential in the world, you're going to get nowhere. So I think that that's sometimes we try to prove ourselves sometimes too much, too long in the wrong environments, where if we take ourselves to another environment, we could probably get the 10x results, and I think that that comes with just self-awareness and understanding, oh, well, I should be getting results. I'm not. Why? Who's holding me back? You don't have power over that person, then it's time to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I want to get into all the entrepreneurship stuff, but because I'm really curious about that comment you made about the first the first people to really underestimate me was my own family. And I think people don't realize that sometimes that as people of color, as children of immigrants or immigrants, there's such a weight and such a pressure, and family is often really important to us, right? And so I think, we had a conversation prior that was about like, hey, when we've worked with, say, start from our white client, like white, like coaches and stuff, they're like, just dive in and everything will be fine. And that's the weight of and the pressure that we carry with that kind of recommendation or advice is it's so much, I think, a lot heavier than people realize, because we're dealing with familial relationships and stuff and pressures and such. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your handling of family disapproval and what that's been like.
Yeah, it was difficult in the beginning until they really saw that, I was providing a better life and stuff for my daughter. But one of the first overcomings I had to overcome is like in the Latin culture, you usually end up with the biological father of your child, right? So that was already like a rebellious thing where I didn't do that, right? The second thing is that you have a secure job and you go to school, you get your master's or your PhD, and success is usually equated to school. So I didn't do my master's. So that was like the second thing. And then the third thing was really just that consistency and stability in a job. Now, the one caveat here is that especially on the Cuban side, many Cuban Americans are entrepreneurial, right? They get to the country and they start to build their own businesses. And one of the influences that I saw growing up was my uncle. So my aunt's husband, he had his own trucking company, and out of everyone, they lived the best, right? So for me, it was like, okay, the business owner is able to produce the most, able to provide the most. This just makes sense, right? And and so when I started to do it, though, it was kind of like, but you're a woman with a child, you know, and it's different because roles are a little bit different, especially in the Latin community. So it was just a lot of hurdles, and I learned not to I learned to let results speak for themselves. I learned to distance myself until the results did speak. And it was difficult because when you're building your business in that season, you're also at your most vulnerable on the business side. You don't have the belief in yourself. Maybe you haven't even gotten your first client yet. All you have is basically faith, right?
Mm.
All you have is like, maybe I'm not crazy, maybe I will get a client, maybe these things that I believe about myself are true, even though everyone else around me is telling me to do something else. And so you're most vulnerable, plus you're maybe getting uh, people in your ear that you love, that you trust, and that you don't want to lose, telling you to do something else, and it could be extremely difficult.
Yeah. So what was the kind of go up against all of that? Your family telling you, no, like, what are you doing? Right. probably other people underestimating you beyond your family. Like, what was the kind of impetus to say, like, hey, I'm doing this thing? Like I'm gonna leave whatever this corporate job is, and I'm gonna bet on myself.
It was really my little one. So it was really my daughter. And it was really me looking at my life and what I could lose versus what I could gain. So it's very different if you're, and I'll preface this by saying it's harder if you're in what I call golden shackles or golden handcuffs, where you're making six figures, easily maybe high six figures in a corporate position, and a lot of people depend on you, and then you're going to go start this business on a whim. I didn't have that. I was on food stamps, so I had a job but I was barely making it. And so what was the worst thing that could happen? It didn't work, and I'd have to live with my mom for a few months and just find another job. The best thing was that maybe I wasn't as crazy, maybe this idea wasn't as insane as people were saying, and it did work, and my life would change forever, and so would my daughter's. So there was much more like gain versus loss in the beginning, and because of her, that's what I focused on.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. Like even the challenge in the beginning of what where do I have to lose, right? I think a lot of folks that I talk to when they're starting to start a business is because they have a six-figure salary, whatever, a secure job is like, that's they don't think about the alternatives of what can be possible, right? We also, maybe as children of immigrants, we don't believe that something else is possible because we're not taught that there is, right? Unless you had that uncle who was an entrepreneur and was doing well, that was a data point for you to say, like, hey, like maybe something else can happen. But a lot of us don't have that. A lot of us don't have entrepreneurs in our families, or we're often that first person that's going out there and trying. And I appreciate you sharing that. What did I have to lose, really? And I don't think you have to have nothing to feel like you have to, like, you're going to lose something. I think often when we're, again, having our secure job, there are options, right? Like, is it the worst thing in the world to have to, like, hang out, move in with your mom like for a little bit? Is it the
Right.
worst thing in the world to, like, and we're not even sometimes telling people to leave their jobs, right? We're just saying, like, hey, like, do this extra thing on top of it. So yeah, I think we don't open our eyes sometimes, or open up our minds to, like, what other options are out there. And maybe potentially, like, having you on here, seeing is believing, right? Seeing it, if I can see it, I can be it.
I love that you mentioned that, because I think that one of the biggest things that BIPOC women can do is to share their success, and that's why it like kills me when they're not visible, right? Because you can influence so many people just by becoming visible, because then you're proof that it's possible for them,
Mhm.
right? Unless a human being sees someone like them doing great things, they really don't even know that it's possible. And that's the true power of like just BIPOC people becoming more successful, sharing their story, and not in a way of arrogance, but just really inspiring people, because you don't know, uh, maybe a woman who's struggling right now, single mom, sees this video, makes a change in her life. In 5 years, maybe she's a multimillionaire and changes her family forever, right? And that could just be just from seeing that you've done it.
Absolutely. I think that's part of maybe a mission that we share, of helping people become more visible, and proving that it's possible, and showing up, because I didn't find a lot of coaches of color to work with. So when I saw you, and like also how down to earth you are, and like, I'm like, this person's real. Like, she's a million followers, but like, she's so like humble and like down to earth. I'm like, that's someone I want to work with. And like, you doing what you do made it feel like it's really possible for me to get to achieve, and like what I want to do as well. So, and now the ripple of impact that is, because I'm trying to do that for other BIPOC folks as
Now
well.
I'm on your live platform.
That's right. Well, talking about visibility, and eventually even access, it's no small feat to have a million followers in anything, but certainly on like LinkedIn. It's like people don't even think about this platform as something to get followers in, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about how that journey of going from probably not even thinking about this platform either as something useful, to now I don't know how quickly you got to even 1 million followers, and like what was that like, or how has that been?
Yeah, it's been like fast, and it's been work, and it's been completely unexpected because I didn't even know what LinkedIn was or that it existed. So when I like left the job and wanted to just use the skills, I was like doing blogs and little marketing things at that job. And my only first goal was to just replace my income at the time, which was nothing impressive. Okay, I was like barely making it, but I just wanted to replace that by working at home with freelance clients. That was just my first goal. And one of the articles that I read was like, go to this place called LinkedIn. And the woman's training was just about pitching people in the DMs, like cold pitching. And I got a couple of clients, but I was like, there's got to be something better than this, because I didn't like the process at all. It was not me. And at the time, it was kind of great timing for me because at the same time, LinkedIn video had just kind of recently been released. So, as you know, when LinkedIn releases a product, they don't do the best to market it. But this is like when people, I mean, no shade to LinkedIn, but it's true. I mean, people just found out there's audio like yesterday. But I started to see people on video, and people kept doing like their first videos. Like, hey, you got to try this new LinkedIn thing. This is my first video. And there was like almost this like wave going around of doing your first video on LinkedIn. So I was like, I'll just do it, you know? And this is like after months of like posting written content and it getting like 1 or 2 likes, you know? So I was like, let me just do it, and it didn't do great, but it got me more than usual. And I was like, oh, this, after about like 2 weeks, I realized video worked, because up until then I was just pitching people, having to connect, they would reject a lot of the time, and I started to get people reaching out to me. So once I saw that, I doubled down completely.
Yeah. So how long has it taken for you to get from 0
Three
to
years
3 years?
Yeah.
And very intentional, like, this is what I'm doing.
Oh no, no. No, that was not my, no, my first goal was to just, find an easier way to get clients, right? That's why I kept doing the video, but it just so happened, I think like 6 months in or something like that, one of my videos, it was actually a video in Spanish. It went viral. And I'm talking about, it got like 500,000 views or whatever. And I was like, whoa. And I just realized that like the more people I would reach, it got bigger than me. Like people would say, hey, what you said really changed my life, or hey, thank you so much for sharing that video. So that's what really kept me going. And then I think at the first year mark, I was like at 50,000 followers, but then another post went viral. And it took me from 50 to 100,000 followers in a month. And then
Wow.
I kept consistent. I didn't really think of it. I didn't like, ride that wave. I just kept posting normally. But when the pandemic hit, is I had like 200,000 or 300,000. And the pandemic, I just made a commitment to my community. I said, I don't know if this is going to be the end of the world or the apocalypse, or we're all going to die of this, this like, we didn't know what was going to happen. But I said, like, even if this is the apocalypse and the end of the world, I'm going to still post and be here for you every day, because I knew that people were going through a really tough time. So it was kind of a perfect storm where more people got on LinkedIn because they had lost their jobs due to the pandemic. So there was a lot more people. And a lot of the creators who had been posting on LinkedIn, were very stressed, and rightly so. And so they stopped creating. So there was less competition and there was more market. And that took me to 1 million.
Amazing. I still am like, wow, how does even someone even do that? So congratulations on that. And something I want to have people understand about you, as because you're my coach, and I chose you very intentionally because I was working for a woman of color who was successful. I could be like, right? And what I very much love about you, though, is like how like humble you are, and like down to earth, and like what you see is what you get. Like it's, and there's a sternness, but also like a comfort that I have with you. Be like, hey, Shanee, I'm like my brain is exploding. Help me, right? And you're like, here we go, it's okay, you know. So,
I'm like Master Oogway, like let's calm down. It's not the end of the world.
but you know, when you get bigger, right? Or when you're a social media kind of persona, people can think of you as some way and not know much about who this person is behind the behind the camera, behind the scenes, right? Um, and I'd love to like just talk more about your style, like how what's really important to you in terms of the way you run your business, the way you work with clients, because your style and your approach for me is what attracted me to you. And like how did that get developed? Like what's kind of foundational for you?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you said it, like what you see is what you get, because I've seen coaches put on this persona, and number one, I'd assume that that's exhausting and you can't carry it long term, right? And number two, it bleeds through the marketing. Or even if it doesn't, it ends up biting them in the end, because what you see is not what you get. And people get sour, and then your reputation is ruined. So for me, that like authenticity and that transparency, some people, gravitate towards me because of it. Some people will never work with me because of it. But either way, I'm okay with that, because I'll find my people. And it just leads to like a better, more enjoyable journey and business, because if what you see is not what you get, you're also attracting clients that at the end of the day you're not going to enjoy serving, and that's when business becomes unbearable.
Yeah. You know, and the testimony to that too is you're on my live show, right? Like I'm one of your students, and I was even embarrassed to even ask you because I'm like, look, Shanee has like 1 million followers, like she doesn't need me, like whatever. And you're like, sure, like it was like no question. It was no, it was like, of course, I could go on this like the show with you. So I appreciate that, and how you never seem to be like, yes, I'm too big for the people, or even your own clients, right?
Yeah, I don't one thing about me is, like, as I've grown, I've made it almost like a priority to maintain my humility and just like be myself, right? Because that's how I am. So I don't care if it gets to 10 million followers. Like, if someone is doing their best and consistent, putting in the effort to grow, like, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm too good for you. It's not who I am. So I can't do it.
Certainly not. And I've worked with plenty of coaches, so there was definitely a different vibe and experience working with you. One thing I want to like take on before we start to wrap up is also just as a Latina, you know, in business, successful, what kind of differences have you experienced or noticed because of that identity? And especially again, as you start to climb and get bigger, where there's less people who look like you at the level that you're playing at.
Yeah, so one of the things is I've noticed that community is really, really important, because even if there's like less people that look like you, there's always going to be someone, right? And it may not even be in your industry. So I think that that's for me one of my kind of things that has been a huge advantage, is that a lot of my mentors, number one, are not even in my industry.
Mm.
And number two, I kind of, once I find a really good community, or once I see people that are minorities that are just crushing it, like, I really want to learn from them what they're doing. And I'm thinking long-term relationship from the get-go. Like, I may not even work with them today. I may work with them in 2 years, and I'm just going to provide value to them today. So I think that, like, first of all, that community is really important. I think that second of all, also identifying people that want to give you business, even if they're not of your culture, is also really important, because there's people who will, and then there's people who won't. And always been really good at identifying people who will, and people who want to pour into me. And then the third thing is just you have to be resilient and try, as hard as it is sometimes, choose your battles wisely, because your energy is more valuable than winning a fight that doesn't matter in 5 years, right? And then also don't, this is so hard, and this is like a double-edged sword, but don't take everything personally. I think that that's what's helped me in business. And again, that's only worked for me, but it's worked in a way that does work for me. And those have been kind of the lessons. I almost expect to be underestimated, and so I use it as an advantage.
Right, so that people can't mess with you. Like you're like watching the scene already. You see how things are playing out.
Yeah, I think that, and if you ever are underestimated, just know like some of the biggest predators and some of the most venomous animals, like look at nature. A lot of the animals that are underestimated uh, win in the end, because you never see them coming. You don't think that they're a threat, whatever. And it can be used to your advantage.
Well, thanks, Shanee. I really appreciate and just love talking with you about all the things. Like now that also they're opening up your more like personal stuff about not just business stuff, but because you are a business coach and you have so much wisdom to share, I'd love to if you could leave the audience with one really practical tip. I know that you've plenty of wisdom and like mindset tips. Definitely follow Shanee because she has got all these different like gems of wisdom about motivation and like mindset and stuff. But today would love to hear one practical thing when for someone who is trying to start a business or grow their business that they can maybe do today.
Yeah. So I would tell anyone, who is the number one person that you admire, that you maybe know in your local community or even online, but like that person, it seems like they run their business in a way that aligns with how you would want your business. You gravitate towards their energy, you love their story, you see that they engage with their community. And I'd say that your highest chance of success, probability of success, is to get as close to that person as possible. Find out what it is that they need, find out how you can get close to them, and do it. Because learning from them is not just going to be learning in a class, but it's also going to be proximity to them, because a lot of what we learn is caught. It's not necessarily taught. So if I was to give someone just really one practical tip, it would be, think of that person and find a way to become, their mentee.
That is so good. A lot of what we learn is caught, not taught. And just being around folks. That's why your network is so important, right? Like,
Exactly.
because you just sometimes the energy, but also, yes, like having the seat at the table, hearing conversations, right? Being in the room, it allows you to learn and do something that you maybe not have thought about. So,
Yeah, and observing like how people move, how they have conversations, what they think about. Like I'll never forget when my first mentor, I asked him about a recession, and he's like, recessions are good, like, I mean, for them, because they're buying up all the real estate. And so that was like the first perspective I had heard, where it's like fear related, because all I had known was like, oh my gosh, this fear and all that. That's all I had seen growing up, whenever an economy would go up or down. But when I started to see those perspectives, I was like, whoa, it's not like, this isn't the universal truth. There's a different side of this if you know what you're doing.
yeah,
So
I love that. Well, Shanee, we're about to wrap up. And before we close, I like to do a little bit of a rapid fire round. Do you mind if
let's
we
do it.
play? Let's do it. All right. You ready?
Yeah,
Okay. So I wasn't supposed to.
make it
Hmm. The future I am building is.
bigger than me.
I am most grateful for.
I'll say my daughter.
Love it. Well, thanks, Janae. And thanks everyone for joining us. We are celebrating Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month. And just for that, is there anything you would like to share, Shanee, about what you're doing, what you're offering maybe for this month and beyond?
Yeah, if you know you are a BIPOC leader and you really Latin leader, and if you want to just reach more people, impact more people, get more visible, they can go to the masterclass, CarissaYouGrow.club, or just message me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have a conversation and see how I could help you.
Awesome. Built by BIPOC really is about connection. So, and I'm pretty intentional about having the show specifically on LinkedIn and LinkedIn Live because of how easy it is to just connect with folks right here. And, Shanee's opening up her DMs and saying, okay, message me. So do that, right? If you liked what Shanee had to say today, click, follow, DM her, right? And if there's any other ways that people can get in touch with you, or is LinkedIn your big platform?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best way.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much today. It's been fun to chat with you. I feel like I want to do so much more and have more conversation.
I know this could have been like a 2-hour episode. I loved it though. Maybe we'll do a second one where it's like 2 hours over tea or something.
Yeah, I'm down for that. Let's think about it. But for everyone else, Built by BIPOC is weekly. Replays are available. So when you see the next event pop up, hit a 10 so you can be notified of the replay or to join live. Also, you can find some of the replays from my other guests in the Conscious Exchange company page. Otherwise, I think that's it. Thanks again so much, Shanee. We will see the rest of you next Wednesday, same time, same place. Invite your friends, and let's go build things together. Bye.